We need to have a very serious conversation about what a single whistle in a Caitlin Clark game has become in the modern sports media landscape.
Notice about this league a couple of things, okay? And I'll get into some of them in later videos. But one thing I noticed is that the way the announcers and the commentators talk about the officiating in the NBA, you never hear them criticize the officiating. I mean, never. Okay? They never criticize the officiating. Even when the officiating's bad, they still give the referee the benefit of the doubt or try to see it from his eyes. In this league, they'll just straight up be like, yo, that was a bad call. This is, and then listen, this was a bad call, and Seattle's going to get that on the road. At home. And Caitlin Clark, she suffers from a DEI whistle. They have to let people hang all over her on some plays on offense.
Become eerily familiar whenever Clark is involved. Did everyone just watch a fundamentally legal defensive play, receive a penalty it did not warrant? Here is where the story becomes genuinely fascinating, rather than simply another officiating dispute. The remarkable dimension of this moment was not simply that a whistle had been blown. Basketball has always been filled with split-second judgment calls, compress the gap between legal and illegal contact to fractions of a second. What transformed this specific moment into another chapter of an ongoing live competition is always incomplete. A single camera angle focused on White might show her looking in one direction, while another might have captured assistants speaking into her ear, players waiting for instructions, or officials explaining procedural details that were not visible to the broadcast audience. Nevertheless, sports fans have never demonstrated significant resistance to dramatic narratives, and within minutes, the image of Clark appearing to plead for a challenge while cameras focused on her coach had become the defining visual of the evening. Whether the foul itself should have been overturned eventually became a collection that has grown substantial over the course of her professional career. That is the broader reality that this moment exposed with particular clarity. Fair or unfair, every disputed whistle involving Clark now carries additional weight because so many earlier calls remain fresh in the collective memory of the audience that follows her most closely. When a player consistently finds herself at the center of viral officiating debates, each new incident naturally invites comparison to those that came before. That growing history has created an unusual environment around Clark's game specifically. Routine fouls that might have passed without significant commentary a few seasons ago are now examined from every conceivable angle. Analysts slow footage to fractions of normal speed. Fans conduct their own rulebook research and present competing interpretations. Former players offer perspectives through podcasts, social media, and television appearances. The attention is a direct reflection of Clark's extraordinary popularity. But it also creates a specific kind of pressure around every official assigned to work her games. A whistle involving Clark rarely remains just another whistle. It becomes a referendum. The gap between real-time officiating and slow-motion replay has emerged as one of modern sports' most fascinating contradictions, and this incident illustrated that tension more vividly than most. A movement that appears significant at full speed can look almost invisible when decelerated to a fraction of normal pace. Incidental contact sometimes appears far more dramatic after repeated viewings than it did in the moment. Officials are required to judge the game at its actual pace, rather than through the forensic analysis available to television audiences, and that fundamental difference in perspective is rarely acknowledged in the heat of controversy. Even so, replay technology has permanently altered viewer expectations. Once people believe they can clearly identify what happened, any disagreement between what they see and what was called becomes increasingly difficult to accept, regardless of the explanation offered. As the clips continued circulating, basketball analysts began offering more measured assessments. Some believed Clark had legitimate grounds for frustration because the replay appeared to show strong positional defense without clear evidence of meaningful contact. Others pointed out that officials may have seen contact obscured from broadcast cameras or interpreted the play based on angles unavailable to viewers. That split among experienced observers highlights an important reality that often gets lost in the passion of the immediate debate. Controversial calls rarely produce unanimous agreement. Even among people of response is itself a product of Clark's unique position in the sport. She arrived in the WNBA carrying expectations without precedent after transforming women's college basketball into a national phenomenon through sheer force of talent and competitive charisma. Every arena she visits, every global sports figure eventually encounters. Every controversial moment becomes major news. History offers context that is worth acknowledging honestly. Michael Jordan spent years at the center of officiating debates. LeBron James has navigated disputed calls throughout a career spanning more than 2 decades. Kobe Bryant, Diana Taurasi, Candace Parker, and countless other legendary competitors all found themselves at the center of officiating discussions during significant stretches of their careers. Superstars receive heightened scrutiny on every possession, partly because every possession involving them carries greater significance for fans, broadcasters, and the league and generate no content. Nobody produces highlight compilations of accurately called routine possessions. Yet a single disputed whistle can dominate headlines for multiple days. That fundamental imbalance creates an environment where officiating excellence goes unrecognized, while errors or controversial decisions receive extraordinary amplification. Even so, moments like this one remind everyone involved why professional sports maintain their hold on collective attention. They combine athletic brilliance with human judgment, emotional investment, and the kind of debate that extends far beyond any final score. Long after the final buzzer sounded, people were still rewinding the same defensive sequence frame by frame, convinced the definitive answer was hidden somewhere between the camera angles. Whether viewers concluded the whistle was fully justified or believed the replay clearly supported Clark's case, one reality was impossible to ignore. A decision lasting only a few seconds had once again generated a nationwide conversation about officiating, replay technology, and the immense and growing spotlight surrounding one of basketball's most compelling figures. The next possession begins. A call that might once have been forgotten by halftime can now live indefinitely through high-definition replays, slow-motion breakdowns, and the permanent archive of social media debate. The larger conversation about consistency, accountability, and the ever-expanding spotlight on professional women's basketball shows no signs of retreating. If anything, the intensity of that scrutiny will continue growing as Clark's career progresses and the league's commercial profile expands around her. That is the world this officiating controversy inhabits, and understanding that world is essential to understanding why a single whistle became the biggest story of the night.